Hello, I'm Jordan. It has been, again, quite a while since I spoke with you guys. I thought I would just make a real brief video today talking about one of my favorite poems. I thought about maybe finding a tag to do, but I always feel kind of weird doing a tag I haven't actually been tagged on. I realize, of course, that that's stupid, but I just felt the need to kind of show my face again. I do miss making videos, and I decided to talk a little bit about a poem that I really love. And this is one of the most famous poems in the English language, and that's the Rubaiyat. And I'm thinking of the Edward Fitzgerald translation, which I have in my Penguin Book of Victorian Verse here. Um, I understand that there is some controversy about this translation. I think Fitzgerald himself admitted that it's a very loose translation. He takes a lot of liberties. I'm treating it as a poem by Fitzgerald rather than as a translation of the poetry of Omar. Oh man, I don't even know his name. See, that tells you something. Omar Kam. What is his name? Khayyam. So I looking at it as a piece of Victorian poetry rather than Persian poetry in translation. So just giving that a heads up. Rereading it to make this video, it's a poem that I read months and months ago and loved. It's certainly one of the better poems I've read in recent years. Um, I reread it just earlier today to kind of prepare myself for this video, and one of the things that really struck me was how spiritual it is in a very unconventional way. Like, I guess that there is some speculation that there are not speculation, but there are interpretations of this poem that read it as kind of Sufi mysticism, and I realize that there are other interpretations that totally deny that. And certainly, this translation, I think, is spiritual in a kind of defiant sense. Like there is a deep nihilism and hedonism and decadence to the narrator's outlook on life, but he always frames it in terms of its relationship to a more spiritual approach to life, and he frames it in such a way that it's a constant response to spirituality and to religion, and it's a constant attack and a mocking of spirituality and religion, which makes it it kind of tips its hand a little bit in the sense that the narrator, I think, is speaking about his life philosophy in these terms um, because he's having a spiritual crisis. If that makes sense. If he was fully comfortable in his own kind of form of decadence and atheism and nihilism, or at least agnosticism, um, he wouldn't need to constantly frame it in reference to the Sufis and to religious ideas and mysticism and spirituality. So in that sense, I think it's a very spiritual poem, and certainly the things that it explores, such as mortality and the fleetingness of anything good or bad, are very spiritual at heart. I wanted to read a quick passage. It's probably my favorite passage from the entire poem, um, and I think there's a couple things I want to say about it. First of all, it reads a lot like, at least in tone, it reads a lot like certain certain of the more nihilistic passages in Shakespeare, especially like in Macbeth or Lear. And also, I think in this translation there is a hint of religious or biblical or Quranic rhetoric. And again, I think it's done in a very mocking way. But anyways, the passage is uh, but leave the wise to wrangle, and with me the quarrel of the universe let be, and in some corner of the hubbub couched, make game of that which makes as much of thee. For in and out, above, about, below, 'tis nothing but a magic shadow show, played in a box whose candle is the sun, round which we phantom figures come and go. And if the wine you drink, the lip you press, end in the nothing all things end in, yes, then fancy while thou art but what thou shalt be, nothing, thou shalt not be less. So again, those final lines of thou art but what thou shalt be, nothing, thou shalt not be less, strike me as biblical in tone. Maybe that's just because of there's the all the thou shalts and stuff. I do think that that's, whether or not it's intentional, it does have that connotation to it, which I think makes it a very powerful and nuanced passage. But the verse above that, in and out, above, about, below, 'tis nothing but a magic shadow show, played in a box whose candle is the sun, reads so much to me like life is but a walking shadow, a poor player who struts and frets his hour upon the stage and then is heard no more, from, of course, Macbeth. So again, you're getting and of course, I'm sure that Edward Fitzgerald was aware of Macbeth, and I strongly suspect he was thinking of that passage when he translated or wrote this passage, as well as thinking in kind of biblical terms. So again, it's kind of using these religious ideas and religious rhetoric and tone in order to negate them, which is kind of self-defensive, I think. Which is not to say that it's unconvincing. I do think that the poem has a very, very convincing attitude. It is very convincing in its argument that life should be spent solely in the pursuit of pleasure, and that even that pleasure is very fleeting. I think one of the most fabulous passages in the entire poem, and it is a fairly long poem, is the section, very surreal and dreamlike, in which the narrator is standing in this tavern with all of these empty clay jars, and they all start musing about their existential status as clay jars. And of course, the parallel is to human beings as empty clay vessels, which is, of course, biblical too, in the sense that man is made from clay, at least in the Abrahamic religions. So again, there's just a whole lot going on here in a religious sense, which is something I didn't really pick up on when I had first read this poem. And I think it's beautifully done. And if there's any question that the attitude towards the poem, or the attitude of the poem, is somehow esoterically actually religious, I think that that is put to rest by another of my favorite quotes, where the narrator says, "Let the Sufi flout of my base metal may be filed a key that shall unlock the door he howls without," which again is kind of mean, but also just beautifully, wonderfully done in its defiance and its kind of superiority, or its attitude of superiority to any kind of mystical approach to life, which again I don't necessarily agree with, but it certainly is relatable and very powerful and moving and delightful. So yeah, those are my thoughts on the Rubaiyat, which, as famous as it is, I had never heard of, honestly, until I discovered it in this volume, probably well over a year ago now. And I just now returned to it, and I found a lot more in it than I had even found the first time, which is, of course, a good sign that I will be returning to it again in the future. So anyways, yeah, those are my thoughts. Let me know what you guys think of this poem. I know most, if not all of you, have read it and have thoughts. And thank you for watching. Have a good day.